Hey, good morning and welcome to the Coffee Break Podcast live edition, and this is going to be a completely different episode than we've done this far, and I'm really excited to share it with you. We're going to be doing a top 5 episode countdown, a few clips from the top 5 episodes that we've had to date, and we're going to be doing some live Q&A, some live question and answer, so we'll be getting into all of that right after this.
Got so much to say, we got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break. Oh yeah.
All right, welcome back, and again, this is going to be a completely different episode. We're going to kind of jump into the top 5 listened to episodes of the Coffee Break podcast to date, and it's going to be interesting because I wanted to kind of take a look back. We're at the middle part of this year of 2019, and we've made a lot of progress with the podcast and seen some really cool guests come through, and so I wanted to kind of talk through that a little bit. So we started prepping for releasing a podcast back in March of last year, March of 2018, and we recorded several episodes that no one will ever hear because they were just horrible, and we were just trying to figure out kind of a flow and a mix of what we were really trying to produce and to try to share. And the mission behind this podcast has always been to share business ideas, practices, and strategies while we enjoy our cup of coffee. And the idea from this podcast came from just a lot of conversations that we had through our office, around our coffee bar, and just chatting about, different things in life, but different practices that we were implementing in our business and how we were learning and growing and challenging each other. And so we wanted to do two things. One, share some of those conversations, some of those lessons learned through that process, and then 2, we wanted to be able to connect with other business owners, leaders, and managers from all kinds of industry and be able to learn best practices from them to see how they implemented certain strategies or implemented certain things within their organization. And so that's what we set out to do back a couple of years ago. And we finally launched it last year in August of 2018. So our first episode went live on August 14th, 2018, and we did a couple of things. I've talked about this before on a couple of different platforms, but the real goal that we had behind this was that we wanted to go on a weekly schedule. So we wanted to have consistent uploads and consistent content shared with you on a regular basis. And to do that, we wanted to hold ourselves accountable by doing this on a live platform. So a majority of our episodes that we do are live. We broadcast them live right here in our studio, which is what we're doing right now. I mean, it is 9:05 a.m. on whatever today's date is. I have no idea. June the 11th, 2019. And we do a majority of them live. There are a few episodes that we've done where maybe we had to work with a guest schedule, and so we record those ahead of time. But we always share them on Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. That has been the process that we've gone by since we started. And so we wanted to have that live element. We originally started strictly on the Facebook platform, only Facebook Live, and over time, over the last couple of months, we've added additional platforms. So right now we are streaming live to Facebook, we're streaming live to YouTube, we're streaming live to Periscope, which is on Twitter, we're streaming live to our website at Loc-Doc.net/live, and we're also working to start streaming to LinkedIn. So I think we're streaming to LinkedIn right now, but I don't think LinkedIn is actually showing it that we're streaming, so we're still working on that right now. But a lot of exciting things to come on that. But coming back to today's episode and why we wanted to do this is, again, we're at the midway point of the year, and it was really just a reflective to go back and say, what are some of the highlights of this podcast to this point? What are some of the lessons learned? So in this perspective, we have released 43 episodes to date. 43 episodes, and you can get all of those at Loc-Doc.net/podcast. We started on August 14th, 2018, and we are now going to share with you the top 5 clips, top 5 episodes, most listened to episodes throughout the podcast experience so far. And we're really excited about what we've got coming up next. We've got a great lineup of guests coming up through the next part of this month and on into the later part of the year. And really excited to be able to share some of that in a kind of a new direction there. So up first, episode number 5 on the top 5 countdown list was actually one of the fastest growing episodes that we've had to date on the podcast. It was from Kirk Graves. Just 2 weeks ago, he was in the studio with us and talking about Carefrontation. So approaching confrontation with a high level of care. Kirk Graves is an executive coach, and he's a mentor and a leader within the Vistage organization, which is a executive coaching and peer network. And he has been a friend of our company for the last 6 years or so, just being able to connect with him and share ideas and learn and grow. And he's been able to challenge us on a lot of different levels. So it was really great to have him as a guest on the podcast. So I want to share this clip of Kirk Graves from just 2 weeks ago on the episode called Carefrontation.
But the reason why the conversation is the way it is at the start is, I would imagine here at Loc-Doc, when you send your guys out with their vans to go to work on a job site or at a building, they show up immediately as lock doctors, right? I mean, they're the specialists. They know, and so from the very first of our conversations, I want to show up as a coach, right? I don't want to be anything but that, because that's where I do add value. And so immediately I want the conversation to be oriented around you, and I want it to be a combination of care and confrontation.
Yeah.
Because that's what coaches do.
Yeah. Well, and that's very, very accurate, because I was talking to my wife this weekend, and I was like, Kurt has always stood out to me because he's this guy that he can challenge you on the hardest things in the nicest way, where you're like, man, that makes me mad, but it's so true, you know? Yeah. And you can handle it rather than just get mad and walk away from it. I guess that's been my experience.
Yeah.
So with that, there's some of these, and I think I told you this when we were talking the other day, but the exposure to what you have brought Loc-Doc and Chris and myself to with Vistage, and with some of the things that you may or may not have even been aware of, but you had invited us to one of the conferences, and we ended up hearing a guy named David Marquet speak, and then we got a free copy of the book, Turn the Ship Around, that sat on the shelf for about a year and a half or something like that, until I was just, we were both, I guess, at a point of frustration, and started reading it. And it really kind of set the trajectory and transformation of this organization. Yeah. That, and the other thing that I was thinking about this morning is a couple of meetings that you and I and Chris had together. Mm-hmm. You uncovered some of the challenges of partnership and the challenges of kind of communication, which also unlocked he and I doing some personality assessments that opened up a better way to communicate. Yep. So you have had, in a very direct and indirect way, I guess, you've had a very huge impact on this organization and its growth without even being directly connected or directly involved.
You. So let's try something. So, so that was 6 years ago.
Yeah.
How many trucks did you guys have then?
That was back in 2013. So we were, we were around 6.
And I think we were really trying to work and figure out how you could kind of scale that. And because you had unlocked this idea that, like, really to drive the business, you had to be able to handle that growth. And that truck is a pretty expensive investment, both in terms of finding the right person that you can entrust a pretty expensive asset with, right? A moving, really asset, really expensive. And so so from 6 to 16 in just that few years, and it's been amazing for me. You know, I drive up and down the freeway out here, and to see the sign change and the number of vehicles, and what you guys have done has been fantastic. So that's a testament to your desire for growth, and you can't walk in here without feeling the culture and that this is a great place to work. I mean, I walk into a lot of places and I can feel it in the room, and to come in this morning and see that you've only gotten better, and gotten better with people is pretty cool.
Yeah, so that was the top 5, or number 5 on our countdown for episodes. Let's see if we can get it. There we go. For our episodes, that was Kurt Graves from 2 weeks ago on Carefrontation. From May 28th, you can check that full episode out. It is very, very impactful. I would definitely recommend that one to anybody that is watching or listening. You want to go back, swipe up, and check that out. Episode number 4 on the top 5 countdown. This is the 4th most listened to episode that we've had. Has been one that went back to November 27th of last year. So November 27th, 2018, we had a video interview with one of our friends from Canada, from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, Lars Johnston. I asked him, I said, hey, Lars, can you get into a quiet spot and we can have this recording of our podcast? And he said, sure. And so he picked the noisiest, loudest Starbucks cafe that he could think of there to join us with. But we had a really great conversation. The focus of it was hiring for culture rather than for skill, and making sure that you're finding good people to come into your organization. And Lars had a lot of insightful information to share with us on that podcast, doing a really great job up in Canada, growing an organization, he and his 2 business partners that are really doing some amazing things there. So I want to share just a quick clip of that conversation with Lars. This is the 4th most listened to episode of the Coffee Break podcast. Is called Hiring for Culture, Training for Skill.
I've had this conversation with Tony from Minnesota a few times as well.
He got British real fast.
Yeah, all my accents are kind of the same, but just depends how you drive your vehicle. So our to start with, 6 years ago, we really made a conscious and an active decision to go after technical people. And by that, we realized that, locksmiths just don't grow on trees. Anyone that's in I'm going to say a trades business specifically, but realistically, it's anyone in any specialized niche. You just don't have the availability of technical staff. If you pulled the audience and said, hey, put your hand up if you have too much technical staff, too much trained people, you're not going to get anyone. So what we started doing is we started looking at just building our own. And when you get into, you look at the culture piece, it's, I'm gonna paraphrase what we used to say around our store, but it's easier to hire a good person, and teach them to be a locksmith rather than, vice versa.
Yes.
And not to take that out of context and say locksmiths are bad people, but I'm simply saying it's the culture piece is actually the harder piece to teach, we find. So we've started hiring specific people and planning and hiring for personality first, and then teaching them the technical skill. So that's enabled us to do a couple things. One, we're not dependent on technical staff. That's not our limiting factor anymore, which has been a huge opportunity for us, because we're basically not competing for the standard type of employee in the industry. So that's been a big change for us and a real benefit for us. But also, it's really enabled us to mold the culture piece first, and then and focus on that and make that kind of our foundation, our building block for our company.
So let me ask you a question then, because it's this stuff is just kind of down my passion, right? You didn't acquire? Did you acquire any companies along the way, or was this all organic?
We've got one organic. We have the High Security brand has 2 people in it. That was an unacquired company just last year. Okay, so you had one acquisition in there, but a majority of your growth has been organic through hiring, redefining, I guess, or refining your hiring processes so that you're hiring good people and then
the other side of that is developing a quality training program that you can develop people inside of your organization, or else then you go back to the other way of just hiring people that are already trained. And that's a common conversation in our industry is it's hard to find trained people. And you and I have had this conversation before, because I'm not looking for trained people. I'm looking for good people that we can train. And if we're doing our jobs right here, then we're going to turn out quality trained people.
Yeah.
Same kind of concept.
Yeah, you're looking for fit first. If they fit the culture, if they fit the attitude, if they fit, the I'm going to call it the right side of what you're looking at. Whereas I'm referring to right brain versus left brain. If the right brain, they're more creative and emotional side fits the culture more. It's the left brain side that you can really work on. So
question for you.
That's what we focus on.
The hiring part, is that something, and this is a question I've never asked you before, is that something you're directly involved in, or is somebody else handle that in your organization?
We just to start with, I did all the interviewing for the company, did all the hiring. My two partners, I should mention, Jeremy and Tyler Bryson, they're my two cousins. We did a lot of the hiring when we were young whippersnappers. We did all the hiring together. We then, that fell more under my role, and so for about 3 years there, I did all the hiring for our company. Once we brought on our customer experience manager, Matt, he started doing a lot of the interview and the hiring for the last few years, because my theory was that, if he's going to be, I'm going to use a hockey analogy, you hire a general manager, the first thing they do is fire their coach, and they hire their own people, they hire their own coach, because how can you hold somebody accountable if you don't let them select your own team? So I was a big believer in having, the team leads in our company hire their own people and their own team. So that was my theory for a few years. And actually just recently, I've found that, the more reading I do and the more I think about it, I'm almost being hypocritical, because they say, what's the most important thing of any organization?
The people.
And it's always, right, the people in it. So as you as a business owner, how can you not be involved in deciding which people are part of your organization? So just literally in the last couple of weeks, we just hired 2 people. I know you guys hired 3, so you're feeling the same adrenaline rush as we are. But
yes.
The last couple of weeks, I was involved in the second interviews. We still have our screening selection process, but the second interviews I was all a part of personally.
So that was episode called Hiring for Culture Training for Skill. That was with Lars Johnston. 4th most listened to episode on the podcast to date. Really informative. Again, I would challenge you and encourage you to go find that full episode and listen to it, or watch the full one, because there's a lot of really good information there. And Lars is a super great, smart guy. I love to harass him a lot because he's a fun guy to pick with, but really smart business guy, and you can gain a lot of insights from him. The one thing I did want to point out is that he's number 4 on the list and not number 1, but we'll get to that a little later. One question that we did get, we're taking some questions through the Facebook Live right now. One question that we did get is your culture built around core values, or are your core values built around culture? Which is a very interesting question, trying to figure out, do you craft your core values based off of your company's culture, or flip that around? I would challenge you to go back and listen to the episode that we released last week with Scott Baker on culture in your organization, because he said a couple of things that I challenged him on and continue to ask questions on, is how do you adjust your culture? And he basically said you can't. The culture of your organization is there, and you can't it's a difficult thing to change. You have to work with it and work within the realm of it. So I would say from our experience, our core values erupted out of our culture. We just didn't have it well defined. So we wanted to take some time to define what the core values were for our existing, and then for our future team members, and for the way that we wanted to continue to operate. So I think it may be specific to the organization, but that's the way that we looked at it, is assessing our organization as it was right now, and then defining some core values in the way that we operated outside of that. So thank you for for that question. All right, let's move along to number 3 on the countdown. So far, if you're just catching up, number 5 was Carefrontation with Kurt Graves. That was an episode from May 28th. So just 2 weeks ago. Number 4 was Lars Johnston, hiring for culture training for skill. That was released on November 27th, 2018. And number 3 on our countdown is Janine Bithell from Rosewood Co. She has done some really great things, growing a brand and growing a business. You can check her out on Instagram. She does some amazing work on Instagram, and that's one of the things that we were talking about. This entire business was built from scratch. She had to come up with the entire brand strategy, the way that she wanted the company to look, and the aesthetic of the company, and she had to craft all that. And so this was the question that I asked her: is what do you focus on when you're trying to build a brand from scratch? What is the things that you need to be mindful of? And here was her question, or here was her answer on that.
I would say figure out what you want it to look like for right now. And I say that to like loop back to that in a second. So figure out what your business is now and what you want it to look like now, and then just do that and be completely consistent. Set yourself like, I'm going to show up 3 to 4 times a week on Instagram post, and show up 5 to 7 times on stories a week, and just be consistent through and through with the type of shots you're doing, with the type of content you're putting out. Even like jot down a list, like post a picture with myself in it once a week, post a picture of our content on a white backdrop once a week, post a picture of our shop once a week, and like keep those on retainer and just keep filling in the blank, a different thing in that category, because that's just an easy way to get consistency in. And then, because what I found is our Instagram followers in the beginning, they were not our clients. Mm-hmm. And they really did not start showing up as our clients until more so this year, which is year 2. So it's like the whole first year was building a trust and a relationship with them, and then now they've been following along with us for so long, they're ready to commit and make a purchase with us, which is so flattering, and so like I appreciate it so much that they've followed with us through the journey for so long, and now they've become clients. So and then it's also a big part is listening to what they're responding to. So like, for example, I'm learning that people, like, we're at this point now where actually a photo of just a really pretty table doesn't get as much engagement on Instagram as if a photo of me in the shop.
Gotcha.
And so I'm learning that they want to see the face behind the story. Yeah. They're human, so they care about what's happening to the human on the other side. It's not like something to kind of promote myself and because I want to be in front of the camera. It's because I want to connect to that human interaction piece.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a part of it is, okay, you see this amazing table, but now you're seeing the process of that table being built. Now you've got this kind of ownership of it. It's like, hey, that's my table, that's my, live edge, whatever that's coming at, like, that's mine, and I saw it there, so you kind of have that connection with the process, not just the product. Yeah, that's very interesting. So moving along that process, so I you can correct me if I'm wrong, you have gotten through some of those things, a couple of different sponsorships and a couple of different opportunities with some tool manufacturers. How did that come about? That's pretty amazing. It's
so amazing. It was one of our goals from the beginning, was to be in a point where we could get some partnerships with different businesses. So we are sponsored by Rigid Power Tools, and the way that came about was actually it was kind of really cool. I followed another woodworker on Instagram, and I noticed, and this might sound like a little shallow, but I feel like it's part of the Instagram math. So I noticed she had less followers than me and less engagement, but she was sponsored by Rigid Power Tools. So I was like, well, that's awesome for her. I'm really proud of her, but I'm like, I want in on that. Like, I'm showing up with like more content more often, more followers, more engagement. How do I get that? So I just messaged her. Yeah. And because we had a small relationship going with another woodworker, and that's another thing I would say with social is find other people in your industry and link arms with them. Like, don't focus on the competition aspect of it. Yeah. Figure out how you can both help each other, because you both offer something different, even though you're kind of in the same trade. But I asked her, like, you're sponsored with the Rigid Power Tools? How did that happen? And She was like, oh, I met him at this trade show. Here's his email contact. I'd love for you to even like get in touch with him. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. Like,
that was a lot
this
easier
is
than I
amazing.
expected.
Exactly. So I emailed the guy. Then we ended up scheduling a phone call. He's a super nice guy, Christian, has a family, and he loved what we were doing. And so he was like over the moon excited to stand behind us and support us in what we're doing. And then also me, I'm like, I love their power tools. They're such like high quality. And so we're working with exotic woods a lot. And for people who don't know their wood math, like pallet wood is made from pine. It's really soft. It's going to break easily. So you don't need a really powerful saw or power tool to work with that. But some of these exotic woods we're working with are really hard and dense and heavy. And so the cheaper manufactured tools can't hold up. They'll burn out the motors on them really quickly. So rigid power tools can keep up with these exotic woods. So that's why I was so excited to be able to like both of us be promoting each other in a sense.
That was number 3 on the countdown, Building a Brand from Scratch with Janine Bithell from Rosewood Co. And, man, she's doing some incredible things. Even that episode released on December 18th, 2018. And ever since then, she's grown the business even more, has gotten a lot of that company started out as designing custom tables for your home. And now they are doing full restaurants. They're providing tables and seating for restaurants in a lot of new opening commercial spaces, and I believe some apartment complexes in uptown Charlotte as well. So they've just exploded over the last year or so, out of some really hard work and focused intentionality there. So really cool things coming from there. And she's got a lot of knowledge. So again, a really great episode to go in and listen to, because she talks a lot about building her brand recognition through social media and how she did that, and specifically the strategies that she went about. On that note, we got another question in on the chat on Facebook Live right now. Do you feel like social media posting is a waste of time and resources? Has it been beneficial for you at Loc-Doc, and is there a ROI? So this is a question that we get very, very frequently about some of our marketing strategies or some of our social media strategies. It's really hard to measure, and you can talk to anybody in advertising. It's really hard to measure ROI because a lot of times people don't necessarily know where they saw your brand show up. Our office right now is sitting right off of the edge of a major interstate in Charlotte, North Carolina. So there's a constant flow of traffic. People see our sign, see our vans, see our logo constantly. But also we're a lot on social media, where we have a lot of brand recognition around Charlotte. We've got 20 vehicles driving around Charlotte right now with our logos on it. So where people see that brand and that logo is subjective, and how they find that. But one of the reasons that we focus so hard on our social media presence is because we want to continue to have brand recognition. A lot of times within our organization, people only need us when they need us. It's not like we're just a consumer product that people are just it's jumping off the shelf for them to buy. And so we're just trying to stay relevant to our customers and our market by sharing value. And so this is one of the reasons why we started the podcast, is because we're sharing ideas from other business owners, managers, and leaders, business ideas, practices, strategies that can apply to anybody in business. So if you're running a management company, if you're running a retail outfit, if you're a startup, these practices can be beneficial in all of those aspects, and then you can gain insight from that. And then maybe next time you need some of our products or services, you'll remember us because you have seen our logo over and over again. So that's kind of the way that we look at it. Do we think it's a waste of time? By no stretch. Social media for us has been a huge way to connect with people. We've made connections with people all across the United States that we would not have been able to do without social media. And because of that, we've learned a lot about our business. We've grown a lot in our business, and we've changed things in our organization because of the lessons that we've learned from people all across the United States and even Canada. So it's been very, very valuable on that aspect as well. So I would definitely say that it's not a waste of time or resources, and it's something that we want to put more time and resources into. The ROI part is a question that we get a lot, and how do you measure that? And that's a difficult thing to measure as a whole, I believe. But I would say to answer that question, I saw a post yesterday, I believe, from a YouTuber. He's 21 years old, His YouTube channel is called Mr. Beast. He's actually based out of Greenville, North Carolina. He just reached the 20 million subscriber mark on YouTube. 20 million. He has been investing in and working on YouTube for 8 years. When he was 13 years old, he started on his YouTube channel working and building that community. To 8 years later, he builds a community of 20 million people. Hard to measure the ROI, but it is something that I believe you do over time. So very, very interesting there. All right, moving along. That was number 3 on our countdown. So to kind of recap, number 5 was Carefrontation with Kurt Graves. Number 4 was hiring for culture, training for skill. Number 3 was building a brand from scratch. And number 2 on our countdown is from April 2nd, 2019. So a couple of months ago, we were privileged to have Steve Van Til, who is the CEO of Brivo Systems, which is a cloud platform access control, one of our partners in one of the products that we sell and install. But he was kind enough to sit down and chat with us about leadership and building and growing an organization and what it's like to lead an organization. And so we were asking him a lot of questions on that. And the question that I asked him was, what do you think has been the biggest change for you in the organization? What's the thing that you wish you would have known years ago that you would have applied now? And this is his answer. So this is Industry Transformer with Steve Van Til from April 2nd, 2019.
I think if I look at the long arc, when we started in this business, and I started out originally as the chief technology officer, so I was very closely aligned with the product. I thought product was everything. Make the right product, and the world will beat a path to your door. And of course, a lot of great products have been created without that happening. And so I think the next evolution was build a great sales organization, and you can sell as much of your product as you have the energy to sell. And I think that has its limitations also. I think the final unifying thing is understanding why people come to work and what their motivations are, and making sure that you're addressing those. And I think if you take care of those, which is another way of saying getting the culture right, then all of those other things that you're trying to do follow from that. And so it took me perhaps a little bit longer to come to that set of priorities, as opposed to focusing on product or focusing on sales, and looking at how happy are people to be working here and how engaged are they with the company. And then good product is an outcome, good sales is an outcome, good customer support is an outcome.
So you're talking about leadership and business culture, right? I mean, and that's very relevant in everything that we're doing. But earlier, we were talking very specifically about the industry and directions and trends and all those things in the industry. What are things that you're doing to kind of keep yourself mentally sharp on all those things? Because that's a tough road to hoe, where you're talking culture and business development, and then also industry information, and trying to keep all those things well balanced.
I'm with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates on this, in that reading is perhaps the most important investment you can make in yourself as a leader. And that includes reading certainly within the industry, but it also includes a lot of reading outside the industry, because I think one of the things that is important for this industry is to look at what's going on elsewhere that I can learn from. What are some of the analogies in other parts of the business world or other parts of the technology world? How can I bring some of the things that people have learned from those other quadrants into what we're doing here? How can we introduce something new that perhaps isn't going on in this industry, and deliver a better product or deliver better service or anticipate the next big thing?
So with that said, what are some books or some things that you're reading now, or things that you've read in the past that have been very impactful for you, that you would say, hey, you need to look this up and really kind of embrace this?
I think if you're looking at management type of books as opposed to industry specifics, one of my favorite authors is still Simon Sinek. I think his first main publication was called Start with Why, and there's about 4 or 5 books since then. And that really addresses a lot of these culture issues and workplace issues, and trying to understand motivations. That's an important thing. More recently, Tom Peters put together a compilation called The Excellence Dividend, which is the summation of all of the stuff that he's thought about in the past 20 or 30 years. And it's a very compelling book, but I think it's better consumed as an audiobook because he's a great reader of his own material, and you get much more of the passion from it when you listen to the audiobook.
So that was Steve Van Til, and I'm telling you what, I've had a lot of great conversations with Steve over the years, and I can tell you that he is an avid reader, and it's one of the things that he talks about. If you ever ask him for leadership advice, he says, read, and it's one of the reasons I've tried to be more intentional. He's influenced me to be more intentional with my reading, educating myself outside of the day-to-day, and being intentional about taking time to dedicate to reading. Or I listen to a lot of audiobooks, but gathering that information on a regular basis, because it's something that can develop you as a leader by getting outside knowledge and experience. So really great advice from Steve Van Til, and a really, again, another great episode to go check out. It's called Industry Transformer. All right, that brings us up to our number one most listened to podcast episode. We'll do a countdown real quick on that. Number 5, Carefrontation with Kirk Graves. Number 4 is Hiring for Culture Training for Skill with Lars Johnston. Number 3 was Building a Brand from Scratch with Janine Bithell. Number 2, Industry Transformer with Steve Van Til. And our number 1 most listened to podcast is actually our first ever podcast, and it's been out there since August 14th, 2018. And it was, you're going to see something very different when we show this video clip, because the setup was completely different. We did this in a different area of our office, and since then we have developed a little bit of a studio space and a dedicated space for it. So you're going to see a little bit of that, but our first ever episode was with our team member here, Levi Gray and Kevan Starr, and we were talking about momentum. So we were just coming off and in the middle of some really, really big projects last year, and the question was, how do we maintain our momentum? And this is the conversation that we had regarding that.
Something I've been mindful of over the last couple weeks especially is because we've been working on some really big projects, and we've got a lot going on. And I just want to, how do we keep that good momentum, that good steady pace without losing control? And that's kind of what I want to talk about this morning.
It's interesting because you bring a very valid point. Anytime you incorporate change, major change within your organization, it's a major disruptor, and you never know what the outcome is going to be. And so we had major disruption at the end of last year and the beginning of this year with some addition of personnel, but we also had change in our workflow management system, which was by far more disruptive than anything that we could have ever imagined. And then once that happens, because 2016 and through the latter part of 2017, we had momentum going based off of our current set of circumstances, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a disruption. And when that disruption happens, then how you react to it or how you adapt to it will determine the next phase. I always think of things in bar graph forms, because that's where my mind goes a lot of times. And I can see, and I've showed this graph multiple times of our business, where there's a bar graph of growth, and you can see flat spots or drop points. And you can also go back to that time when we made a major change and it impacted us. Shortly thereafter, you'll see a spike up.
Uptick, yeah.
But and what's happened, what I've seen from a momentum standpoint, which is very interesting, is over time, as our organization has gotten more and more adjusted to change, our momentum rebounds at a faster pace. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think that's so important to understand. Understand kind of, I guess, if you're so focused on that specific situation where you're starting to slow down a little bit, and not looking at the big picture, as someone once said, seeing the forest for the trees. Named Kevan Starr. But I think if you're not looking at the big picture and focusing on, okay, well, we're slowing down right now, but we're ultimately building. Sometimes you have to pull it back a little bit to get more momentum, so that you can get more force. So when you see the big picture, ultimately that long run momentum of building more speed and building more growth and progress, we have to constantly look at what is killing our momentum overall, but also what do we need to pull back on a little bit so that we can shoot forward more.
Sure.
And so we have to.
Yeah, I think one Wednesday morning you were talking about the slingshot, right? You got to pull back in order to release and go forward.
And I've got a slingshot on my desk for that very reason.
Well, the one of the great analogies that I've heard before is, bow and arrow, same kind of concept. Slingshot the same way. Is that momentum is if you have to pull it back, so you've got to stretch, and then when you let go, you're going to see
you're
distance.
off to the races.
But if you just take it and push,
you go nowhere.
Yeah. So it requires a bit of a stretch so you can get the longer distance, and the more you stretch, the farther you can go. And I think that kind of plays into to part of that.
It is, and and kind of what you were talking about, looking at bar graphs. If you were to go back and look at it, I think the very interesting thing is over a longer period of time. Whereas last year, your highs are essentially like what our lows are at now. You know what I'm saying? So the whole, everything is kind of moving forward. And we have lulls and we have down spots, but they're not, they're not like massively detrimental. As we kind of grow and expand and we learn ultimately, what used to be your goal is kind of now like our baseline.
Correct.
And now, it's just kind of everything, and
it's constant adjustments.
And I have to throw a cliche in here because Levi, he calls me the purveyor of fine cliches, and I pride myself in that. But, as they say, a rising tide lifts all boats, So I feel like the tide is rising, and we just got to ride the wave.
So there's a bunch of cliches in that episode and a lot of good information as well, as we were launching the very first episode of our Coffee Break podcast. Again, a little different format now than when we started, but we have always improved that process and try to make it a little better, which has been really fun to experience and to kind of be able to take a little look back over the last couple of months on that process. So a recap for you, and I really would encourage you to go check out Loc-Doc.net/podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Anchor, wherever you listen to Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find this. Just search Loc-Doc or Coffee Break Podcast, and you're going to find it there. A new episode every Tuesday at 9 a.m. We're putting that out there for you, and a lot of really great, insightful information from people in our industry, people outside of our industry, and really professionals at their craft. So really would encourage you to go check that out. Number 5, Carefrontation with Kurt Graves. Number 4, Hiring for Culture, Training for Skill. Number 3, Building a Brand from Scratch with Janine Bithell. Number 2, An Industry Transformer with Steve Van Til of Brivo. And number 1, most listened to episode is our very first episode, Momentum, with Levi Gray and Kevan Starr on our team here, talking about how we've tried to maintain our momentum through some tough times that we had last year and as we were building up as the year progressed. So really beneficial. Thank you for joining us today for this podcast. A little bit different. Next week we're going to jump back into our normal process. We're going to have a great guest here who is a business partner in a local residential property management company. He's going to be talking about how they've grown their business from 60 accounts to over 600 accounts, and the process and the lessons learned with that. It's going to be very exciting. So that's going to be next Tuesday right here on the Coffee Break Podcast. And we'll see you then. To learn more about the topics discussed today and to connect with us online to hear all of the episodes available, visit Loc-Doc.net/podcast.
We got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break. Oh, yeah.
The Coffee Break Podcast is brought to you by Loc-Doc Security. We'd love to connect with you online on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Just search LOCDOCINC.